Hi, Guy. Guy's coming from New Zealand tonight. I'm here in Nelson, British Columbia, and we're ready to go. So, uh, Guy, when was it that we met? Do you recall?
It was early 2010.
Mm.
I graduated university around the start of that year. Um, Crazy stressful exams at the end of 2009. And then I did a little, I don't know, maths course or something over Christmas. And then that was enough points to get my degree. And then I was working, first job out of university, I think was for the warehouse. That's the New Zealand version of Kmart or Walmart or something
Mm.
like that. It's one of
Mm.
those shops that sells everything. And then I worked for a coal research lab for a while. And while I was there, I got to emailing you. I'm not sure how I saw your name. I think it might have been in that How We Heal forum. And then I emailed you and said, hey, I did BE back in the day, back in the late 90s or something like that. And ended up going to Arizona.
Uh-huh.
And you had that beautiful intensive in, was just out of Sedona,
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
somewhere close by Cottonwood was the town where your friends
Uh-huh.
lived.
Oh, Cornville. I think it was sort of in between Cornville and Cottonwood. Um,
Okay.
Grace
What was
Grove was the name of that.
Grace Grove? Yeah, I remember
Yeah,
the Grove, but
yeah.
that's right.
That was really a beautiful time.
That was, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I remember coming out of that and feeling like colors were brighter, and
Mm.
it was like that whole kind of expansion of emotional intelligence, kind of for the, I don't know, 6 months or a year or so afterwards.
Yes.
Not not sort of really blatant, but just a bit more powerful. Like sadness was more sad, happy was more happy.
Uh-huh.
You know,
The
everything
awareness of
was
the
just,
emotions increased.
yeah, just everything was just a bit brighter. Like you turn your contrast settings on your TV, sort of thing, so you can see the definition a bit better. Is that a good analogy? That sort of thing.
So, how did you go with that? Because sometimes that can be really challenging. It's not like when we become more aware of our emotions, it's not always,
Yeah,
you
not
know,
always good.
all happy
Well,
and.
in that particular year, it wasn't too painful. It wasn't as painful as other times, so it was kind of a gentle transition back into BE.
I see.
And I remember having a lot of really good sort of friendship with a couple of my workmates, and there was a fair bit of level 7 jokes and sort of silly behaviour and maybe a little bit of out of control humour, which we know sometimes it's not always a good thing, but it was, looking back, it was good times. So, uh, having the giggles is one of the more easier aspects of healing crisis to go through.
That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and
And you were seeking out some point holding in New Zealand as well, were you not?
yeah, I'd done a fair bit. So I was in a group back in the late 90s or so, maybe early 2000. We met sort of weekly for a couple of years. We were pretty dedicated until it all fell apart for, I know, all manner of various reasons. We talked about that at that cafe in Arizona, I remember, and looking back on that, it was really interesting. Maybe the thing that springs to mind is I think it's chapter 8 in book 1 of Logic and Sequence, where he's talking about the dark forces and how they will sort of meticulously, sort of perfectly oppose and seduce things and that sort of thing. And you can't, I can't be 100% certain, but it just looked like there were a whole lot of external things that were sort of putting a dampener on that group. But
Mm.
anyway, I sort of persevered and I took a bit of time away from BE and kept on plotting, and a couple of the guys from that group. So I've talked about Mike, who in the past, I've talked about my friend Mike, who's a marathon runner. He and one of the other guys from that group were at my 40th last year. So it's still really cool to sort of keep in touch with these people after 20 years, you know, even though we don't really hold points anymore. And I did a fair bit of point holding with Mike over the years, but we have, you know, maybe different ideas about how it should be done. And he lives maybe an hour's drive out of town from where I live. And so that makes it a little difficult. And yeah, I haven't really done much point holding with him since about 2014 or 2015 or so, 2016-ish. Mm. And the other person I've seen a few times is Graham Bennett, who I think you've met a few times. He's a bit of a big name. He's top of the pile in New Zealand. Yeah, and lately, I know I haven't been doing too much point holding this year, but when I've done some over the past few years, I've been using these. This is like a bit of wooden, I don't know, dowel.
Oh yes. Uh-huh.
And you know, just sand the end, and you can, you know, fits in your SDO.
Uh-huh.
It's obviously not perfect, but you can get a burning from it. So I know. Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of point holding on myself the last few months.
Oh really?
Yeah, a lot of heart points, a lot of points. Like right now, I'm working the thymus. Just really, whatever is presenting, I'm just digging in there as best I can. And one of the last videos, in the video that I was speaking with Alice Ray, I had mentioned that I was using a piece of jade, you know, as a point holding tool. But I want to clarify in this video that I only do that sort of as a last resort if I'm really unable to hold the point with my thumb or my fingers. As you know, the electrical current is really important to the process. So yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. That's I think that's really important. And you know, when there's no one around to hold points with, you know, we have to do that. We have to hold our own points. And
yeah, I mean the heart points, and well, it's not too hard to get to.
Right. Yeah.
But you know, doing it back
the
in your head.
STOs are a little tricky.
Yeah. How do you go on some of those sort of points around the sternum and the breastplate there and the shoulders?
Yeah, I just find a point and just hold it to the best of my ability.
Find and push. Yeah.
Find the pain and push. Yeah.
Cool.
Except, you know, there's parameters around that. You know, that find the pain and push. Of course, that's not for sort of the general public. That is more for people who are either under the guidance of an instructor or have enough BA experience to know where not to go. You know, there's a lot of nerves in the arms. There's a lot of, we stay away from the abdomen. There's a lot of places that we don't go near. So it's not quite as simple as find the pain and push. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably very sensible to point that out. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's totally not the kind of thing to be willy-nilly about.
Right. And the points, of course, for people who don't, you know, who are watching this that don't know the progression of points, they're done very systematically. There's what we call a flow sheet to the points. And so what Guy and I are talking about today is really how the body electronics principles and a lot of the actual practical application is also present in the Gnostic way. So Guy, will you in very general terms, however you feel to share it, Can you give like an overview of what you feel body electronics is in its essence?
I've heard it called a healing modality in the past, and I would say that's pretty good. That's a pretty good, accurate representation or pretty good description. Uh, it's if I could add to that, I'd say it's very all-encompassing in the sense that it begins with the physical body and goes into the very personal and very intimate emotions, and then it sort of goes beyond that even to wherein we see where we decided to become a certain type of person, or in terms of, say, maybe we've decided to be a giving person or a receiving person, or a more causative person or a more passive effect kind of person. And we look at these very powerful kind of constructs in our mind.
So where the patterns are born in the mental body.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's an incredibly powerful, purposeful modality. It's really a blessing to have been part of it for whatever 20 years, give or take, off and on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
to
anyone watching,
I did 20 years.
Yeah, I really take my hat off to you. To anyone watching, I would say this lady really brings they call it the accurate teachings. I'm sorry, I haven't thought about how I should say that. I probably should have, but I
think
thoroughly
it's better
recommend.
Unscripted.
Yeah, I thoroughly recommend your intensives and your teachings to anyone who's interested in going within themselves and taking those kind of responsible steps to, should we say, become a better person, a more aware person, a healthier person.
Yeah, conscious. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we know that it's not an easy path. So that's one of the things that I've really contemplated over the last few years, because we saw the numbers drop off dramatically. After about 2005, things really started to drop off, and they dropped off for Doug, and then they dropped off for me as far as numbers. And I was seeing a lot of people who were doing other work that, their numbers were also dropping off. But the what I noticed was that the modalities that sort of lost the people's interest, the general interest of people coming and doing the work, were the ones that were difficult, the ones that really took a lot of preparation, and then when they actually got to the work, it was required to go into some really intense and um, uncomfortable is an understatement, of course. But it was just it's just what I noticed, that there was sort of like this time period that from about 2005 to now 2020, that the numbers were gaining with people who were doing things that were easy, and people seemed to be flocking to that. But now I think the tide has turned again. And I feel with this, the last few months that we have enjoyed on this planet, and having all of the stimulus and the experiences that are going on now, I think it's really stimulated a lot more people to understand that this is a time to really do the deep work. So I expect when I start holding intensives again, I expect those numbers to start to climb. Yeah. I think it's really important at this time to really dig into the work. And I put a call out to anybody who's been in body electronics with me or anybody else, um, to really, remember the principles and practice them, like, a daily practice.
Mm,
Stay aware of what the principles are that, um, set the foundation and set um, the groundwork for consciousness change.
mm,
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah, it's easy to get sort of caught up in, the 10,000 things,
Right,
the hustle and bustle.
right.
But yeah, what you say make sort of reminds me of the fact that BE is a way of life.
Hmm.
It's not just something you do a little bit. I mean, you could do it for a few months or 6 months or whatever and get some serious benefit. But I'm thinking of the sort of staircase and you're just going up and up and up and up.
Right.
And like you
Yeah,
say, you're
not
in.
waiting for an intensive to do the work. Right.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
When I was taking Doug's intensives, Doug Morrison's intensives, the author of How We Heal, and he was my teacher of body electronics. And then later, when I became an instructor, I was teaching beside him for a little while, going through my apprenticeship into the,
Wow.
walking through the fire. And uh, I had he was always giving 3 intensives for many years. He gave 3 intensives throughout the year, and so I would just manage my entire life around them, so that I would be preparing for several weeks prior to an intensive, do the intensive. And by preparing, I was taking loads of liquid minerals, enzymes, probiotics, making sure that I had raw protein every day, and um, the whole program, essential fatty acids, and so I would really up it for the time that the intensive was on. You're taking gallons. We drank gallons of liquid minerals, and then after the intensive, to encourage the healing crisis, of course, we would the rule of thumb is to take a little bit less every day. So however long you built yourself up to the healing crises and the amount of minerals, particularly, that you were taking, you would gradually decrease that at the other side. So what ended up happening for many years for me was I would build up the healing crises, have the intensive, then gradually decline from the minerals, but still support the healing crises. And then I would get to a point where it was time to then prepare again to up the minerals and get ready for and encourage and get ready for the next healing crises. So there
Mm,
was never a time, and I'm sure that Doug had that figured out because he's such a mathematician, that he had that figured out, that that's what we would be doing, that we would be constant, for us that kept coming back, that we would be constantly sort of, working our way into healing crises and continuing it.
wow, what a blessing.
Right.
So, can I ask how long were these intensives? Were they
He
like
would
1 week,
do,
2 weeks, 6 weeks?
there was usually two week intensives, and often there would be like, well, in 2003 and 2004 there was a 1 month um, instructor's course. So that was like 2 weeks on either side and then 1 month in the middle. So so it would be 8 weeks per year. And then the same thing. 2005 was the visualization and consciousness course. So that was the same, 2005. And then 2006 and 7, 2007 being his last year that he gave courses. Um, I think it was 2 weeks, 2 weeks, and 2 weeks. I think that, if I remember correctly, but there might have been something a little bit longer in the middle too. But the last instructor's course was in 2004.
Mm. Wow.
Mhm.
Mm. I remember asking Graham Bennett, I think back in 2015 or so, would you take an instructor's course? And he said something like, "Well, you'd be the only person that'd be interested in it."
Right. That's right.
But hey, at least you'd learn a lot if you were the only one there, I suppose.
Right.
And
Nobody
you
to hold
wouldn't,
points on.
yeah, you wouldn't be able to get away with going to sleep in class, would you?
Yeah. Yeah, those were really good years of
I
there were
bet.
so many people that uh, Jim Graham
Mm,
came many times over those
mm,
years. He attended at least one instructor's course. He attended the V&C, and there was other intensives too that he came, the 2 week intensive. So he was there a
wow.
lot during those years, and
Mm,
as well as many other, body electronics veterans. And it was, yeah, I look back on those years with great fondness because, and when you get through something and it was, it's extremely difficult, but yet when you're on the other side of it and you look back and it was almost the difficulty that became such beauty.
mm. Yeah, yeah,
That's how I remember all of those intensives because I know they were extremely difficult for
yeah,
everyone,
yeah,
and because we were so dedicated, and we were really just we were in massive healing crises at many times. And of course, for the people who don't know about body electronics, we were also giving as much as we were receiving. So that was one of the first things that body electronics, that really attracted me was the equal giving and receiving. And there was no
mm,
like healer and healee. That paradigm was
mm,
completely removed, and it was
yeah,
just like um, that equal amount of giving and receiving, which I felt was so foundational to the program,
yeah,
and really, really, really important. It just put everybody on the same playing field,
yeah,
and that's something that you actually don't find very often in in this modern world. There's usually some hierarchy embedded in things, and
mm,
really they're uh, by the time people have become an instructor of body electronics, they're so humbled that they wouldn't even think about uh, like a power struggle hierarchy.
mm,
They've come through the cranials, and they've done so much progression in the emotional body that it's just you get to a place of extreme humility.
yeah. Well,
So that those times were just so beautiful, almost because they were so difficult.
mm.
So yeah.
Hearing you talk about giving and receiving just there really puts a chill up my spine. I think it's, just, I mean, in a good way.
Right, right.
Yeah, it's yeah. I've
Yeah.
just had some really powerful, I know, unexpected moments, on the table where
Mm,
anyone can do this work.
right,
It's sort of
right.
yeah, it is really humbling,
Yeah.
definitely. Like you're in awe of something very powerful.
hmm And there seems to be like as I trend, it was one of the things I had to contemplate for so long. Even though I was being internally encouraged to make my own body of work, that
Mm,
I really kept, and I'm a very much a traditionalist in the work that I do, and by that I mean if I've asked for teachings and I've received a body of work, then I know the importance of keeping it whole, keeping it
mm,
what you could call traditional. So I struggled with that in terms of because I know that for the bodies of work, that I've done, specifically, the Ayurvedic work, the body electronics work, the work with elders uh, of indigenous origin here on Turtle Island, um, and and the body electronics work. So those were, they were complete in their essence, and to bring anything into those was, in my estimation of of really spending many years with each one of those works, there was no room for anything to be changed, no room for
Mm.
anything to have something inserted into it, because they were whole, they were complete.
Mm.
So the only way to for me to have my own body of work was to really decipher what was compatible within all of those teachings, because I was holding points on people before I'd even heard of body electronics. I was
Mm.
doing that out of some kind of inner knowing.
Mm.
So so I wanted to um, really bring different things together that really fit, and were making something else that was whole. You see, so
Mm.
that's really where I went with the Gnostic way.
Okay.
Hmm.
So you've incorporated other things like I've seen Kriya yoga and stuff like that. I don't
Yeah,
know.
well, the Kriya Yoga, it's really more about the, like, there's so much yoga talk nowadays, and
Mm.
usually when somebody says to me something about yoga, they are speaking about hatha yoga. So the
Okay.
asanas, the physical aspect of
Okay.
yoga, which is maybe the breathing techniques as well, the pranayama, and that's usually about as far as it goes. What my yogic uh, span of 9 years, when I was very much dedicated to a very traditional yogic practice of Kriya, the Mahavatar Babaji being the Satguru, um, and I mean extremely traditional practices and teachings, and um, that covered, the entire span of bhakti. So the devotional yoga, or the yoga of love. So we kept our bodies supple, but hatha was really the least of what we talked about or spoke, or practiced. We would do like sunrise salutations at sunrise, and we would do things to keep the spine supple, so that we could do long meditations. We would do weeks of fasting. We would we had an agni fire down deep into the ground in a very traditional way, that we would do offerings on the night of the full moon. We it was an extremely traditional and very deep practice. Um,
Mm.
that's just touching upon it.
Okay.
But so those teachings come in more of a in more of a spiritual way, let's say.
Okay.
Not so much, and I don't actually really even talk about them very much. There's
Mm.
some breathing, there's some breathing pranayama that's appropriate sometimes. Um, but mostly and that's actually bringing me back to what I was saying before about all these traditional teachings that that are whole. So one of the things I recognized about body electronics and Ayurveda, and everything else that I spent blocks of time with, is that there was like this spiritual bubble around it. So spiritual encompassment, and I would, um, especially when I would be doing an intensive and holding that energy for a lot of people, and it was really well taught through Doug as well. He was extremely adept at holding an energy for a group to be able to do this work. And there has to be someone that holds that spiritual bubble. And when I stepped into body electronics, I saw that that bubble was there. It wasn't something I had to create. It wasn't, it wasn't something I had to pray about or work at. It was something that was already present. And when people would come to do the work, all I had to do was be aware of it, and just have that awareness. And there was like this, and I recognized that there was like this immense protection around the people doing the work. And it was, it was awing at many times to witness. And you spoke about the one of the intensives that you came to Canada and participated in. Oh no, that was in the U.S. Sorry, that one was down in when I went down to Arizona. But um, that one in particular, I remember that there was an eagle, a bald eagle, which was actually very, very unusual in that area. And there was a bald eagle. Every time that I would sort of step out of the area where people were doing the point holding, I would look up, and that eagle, it was just one all by itself, would be circling. And I don't know if you remember, were you in the car with us when we were leaving that intensive and that eagle came down and swooped right into the car?
Yeah,
You remember that?
I think so. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And so that, that's what I'm talking about. It's just about um, you know that protection, that spiritual, um, what's necessary when we do this really, really, really deep inner work.
Mhm.
So that was actually one of my biggest concerns in regards to um, kind of breaking up certain aspects of other modalities or other teachings. And then, and Drimvalo's teachings too, actually, I didn't mention that one, but Drimvalo Melchizedek's teachings play a large role in my work. The teachings of the heart, the teachings of connecting in with the earth and the sky. Those teachings are incredibly important.
Mm.
So, I really had to feel that for quite a long time. I would say 2 or 3 years in contemplation of that before I really had the realization that that what I had put together. And I did that, by the way, not so much with the mind, but I did that with the inner guidance, the inner knowing, which is the gnosis, the Gnostic way. So it was like it was encouraged internally, and then and I would sometimes write. I'd get up early, very early in the early morning hours, and some things would come to me then, and then it was in formulation for quite some time. But then when there came this time when I felt that spiritual power enter into the work. And then I knew it was time, that it was time that it could then be released into the world.
Cool.
And I feel that bubble whenever I'm speaking about it or speaking with others, having a group. I feel that bubble. So I really, really look forward to the future times when there can be large groups of people again coming together
Yeah,
and doing this work.
yeah. Wouldn't that be the best?
Yes.
The coolest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It will. It is just, we're just going to have a few more little ripples. And I see 2021 as an opening for this work for large groups. I'm talking to a lot of people online right now because that's the best way. And even creating these videos, really to give people an understanding and like a starting point, because there's an education process that we have to go through, as you well know, that you can't just show up at an intensive and expect to dive right
Yeah.
in, because there is,
It's that
there's a lot of
preparation.
things, right?
Yeah.
Not only the physical preparations, to get
Yeah.
the body and the electrical currents flowing to the point where we can really get some regenerative work done, um, but even the books. I was going in when the numbers started to drop off. I was like, okay, well, how can I make it more palatable for people to attend? And so I tried the way of, um, instead of making more work and more reading and more study and more preparation, I attempted to make it less and less and less, you know, just as an experiment to see if, if that would possibly, um, be better for people. As a lot of times I would hear, well, I don't have time. That was often a justification for,
Mm.
not attending an event, or not doing the readings, or, so I attempted to see really where that would go if I really condensed a lot of information into a small book, which I did, as you know.
Mm.
And but what, interestingly enough, that didn't help.
Mm.
So the making it easier or less time consuming didn't actually encourage people to do the work.
Yeah.
So that was a good lesson for me, to because when I came into the work, we had a lot of reading, a lot of study. We had a
Yeah.
lot of things that we had to get under our belt before we, before I studied for 2 years before I even felt like I could um, attend a point holding.
Okay. Wow.
And I read the Logic and Sequence series, and I did it by the book, really, like literally.
It's yeah. It's a lot of work, but afterwards you feel like a university professor or something, don't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the beauty. Like when my children were going through university, and I was, and I'd be teaching body electronics, and they were, having to read and make all these papers that were ridiculously long, and on topics that I felt were also quite ridiculous.
Mm.
So, and then to kind of compare that, then I started to up the, remember when I started to get people to do essays, write an essay on a principle. It didn't have to be long, but they really had to study and contemplate and meditate and get to a, some place of understanding, and then write an essay on it. So I'll be doing that again. I'll be doing it. I'm not going to. I see the importance of that, the importance of the preparation. It's not a mind, um, particularly for the mind. It's really for me, the study was really important for when I would be on the table and I would get to this place. It just gave me that construct, that holistic construct. I could literally be aware of myself moving through the construct.
Mm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that only occurred because I had studied it to the, it's like playing a violin. You practice it and practice it, and then you can do it sort of automatically. And it was kind of like that, so that I would just be able to know where I was at and know where I was going on the table. Yeah. Which is really
Mm.
important, I think, especially when you're moving from the emotional body to the mental body, becomes
Okay.
extremely important. Yeah.
Okay. I don't think I've touched the mental body maybe once or twice. So there's been a couple of times where I thought, well, that must be the mental body or something.
Uh-huh.
So
Well,
it's
the
a
mental body
totally
is
different.
touched. I would disagree with you there, Guy, because the mental body is actually touched every time we go to the painful level of pain, or I mean, the painful level in each emotional level.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
we're actually
Okay.
touching the mental body each time. So you're even touching the mental body in unconsciousness when you
Okay,
come to the
interesting.
painful level of unconsciousness and the painful level of apathy, painful
Okay,
level of
yeah.
grief. You see?
I think in what I said there is maybe a little absolute.
Yes.
And you just remind me of that model in How We Heal, where he's got the three bodies interpenetrating or interdependent or something like that.
Yes. Uh-huh. Right.
Mm.
But by the time you get to the painful level of pain, then you start to see, because the awareness increases each time you go through an emotional level, as you well know. But when you get to the emotional level of painful level of pain, then you really get to see both sides. That's when the dualities are extremely clear and the awareness is acute. So you really see the duality, you see the pattern. It's just as clear can be.
Mm.
And that's
Interesting.
where the mental body becomes very, um, um, you can enter it at that point. Let's say that you can enter into the mental body. And then, like as Doug would say, that's when the rules of the game changes. So instead of using the transmutational energies, what I call the three powers of forgiveness, love, and gratitude, I mean, that's always encompassed in the mental body, but it's actually then you become aware of the light. So the violet flame, and it can either be. Sometimes I experienced it like a blowtorch. So that's when
Mm.
you know you're in the mental body, when you're aware of the violet light, the violet flame, the violet fire, whatever you want to call it. And sometimes it was very light and not, it wasn't strong. It didn't seem strong, although it was. Other times it would just be like a blowtorch blowing right through you. Other
Mm.
times it would be uh, in, through, and around, and it would encompass like not only my inner self but my physical body and around in the auric field. Sometimes it was like that, and it would just kind of take on its own. I would allow it, although of course we're in some sense of control of it too, because we've been through the power and control, so we do have some sense of control
Mm.
of the true control that is required. um, so we control the light so that the dualities can be brought into the light, and the light, the light is the transmuter at that point. So
Mm.
yeah, so it would just be, I would just be aware of what was there, not manipulating it or creating it in some way.
Mm.
Just, it would just present itself, and I would be aware of it. And then I would be aware of the duality. I'd be aware of an attachment that I would have to one side of the duality, and then I literally would see, and it was and this is all internal, of course. Not, I'm not seeing it with my eyes. I'm seeing it with my inner vision, which is very acute at that point once you've come through the thyroid and the pituitary. So the duality would, you would actually feel it and see it, and it would have like a pressure, like a magnet that's repelling it. It would be like a repelling of the magnet, and I would literally watch the fire, the violet fire, work with it until it would get closer and closer and closer until it would come together as one. And when it did that, there was often a bright flash of light, and often people even in the room would experience it. And when a
Mm.
duality was actually coming together, and when that occurs, then that duality has come into harmony with itself. So at that point, then it's not separated by judgment or what we call resistance in body electronics. So the judgment had been, is completely released at that point. But that is through the power of the violet flame, the Christed
Mm.
light, whatever we want to call it. but it is a very powerful light that comes from our essence, from the source of our being.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hmm. So when
Hey.
we get through this is the important part to me, for many, many, many people. It's the power
Mm.
and control.
Mm.
It's I feel like Earth is right now in a healing crisis, um, affecting all humanity. It could be affecting other beings as well, other animal forms, but particularly the consciousness of humanity, because we've been disconnected from our instinctual, from our
Oh
intuitive
yeah.
self, and in the earth, which is our connection with the earth, and the earth connected to the sun. So the disconnection of that has created this false power and control
Mm.
that is really being played out on earth right now in this massive global healing crisis that we're going through.
Yeah. Well, we're having our elections here.
Uh-huh.
Election day just started today, and we can vote for the next 2 weeks. So
Okay.
the last month or so has just been every politician going, "Oh, I'm the best. Vote for me. Vote for me. Vote for me." It's been pretty cool.
Well, I've held the vision for many years, that there'll be a time when, and the vision was given to me, but I've held it for many years, that there'll be a time when all false power will be completely, will just crumble into a fine dust and be released back into the void, which is all those power and false power and control issues that
Mm.
we've either. I don't think there's any human on the earth that has not participated in false power and control.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
right? So it's really getting to that honesty of what we're holding,
Mm.
what we're still attached to, what we're still perpetuating in our lives, that is false power and control. And there
Mm.
is a power and control. There is definitely a power and control, and it's really made known when we're going through this area, which is um, all the levels of anger. The right through the volcanic rage. I like to
Yeah. Wow.
express in there.
Yeah, it is volcanic sometimes, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, very much so. Yeah, and to be able to, the power comes in. The real power comes when we can contain and control that which
Yeah.
we are, which we have uh, succumbed to within ourselves.
Without unleashing it against the world or
Exactly.
losing our
It has to be
temper.
controlled within, when we can, truly
Yeah.
control that energy, and not allow even a trickle out of our field to go to any other living force at all.
Mm.
Not the earth, not another being, nothing. Containing it and
Mm.
controlling it within. That's when we're really going to like pop up scale so quickly. But it has to
Mm.
be contained and controlled. When we get to the rage, when we get to you know, the angry level of anger, that's where the volcano starts, the inner volcano. That's where
Mm.
the lava really starts to flow. So when we can contain that force, anger is a tremendous fire. It's a very, very, very hot emotion. So when we
Mm.
can contain and control it, that allows for us to, while loving it, by the way, we're not just trying to contain the lava, because that's never
Mm.
going to work. Um, but really experience it, be present with it to the absolute best of our ability, increase it and let it just move through us, and feel how much we can love that feeling of anger, how much we can love that volcanic lava flow of pure rage. And when we can get to that place where we can truly love it, then we will pop into our own angry pain. It'll take us up into
Mm.
angry pain. And then we get to experience the ways in which we perpetuated the anger. Uh, and we get to, like, anger is also like a one-sided. It's all about me.
Mm.
So when we get to the pain, we start to then see, okay, it's actually including something other than ourselves.
Yeah. There's no
And that's,
empathy in anger.
yeah, that's an angry pain. We get to see that. And then if we can love that enough, and control it within and love that enough, then we'll pop into the level of pain. And that's when the real intense anguish, we have to go through that anguish. But the anguish, it's more intense than the anger. But the anguish, the levels in pain, we have this new birthing of a deeper compassion, uh, which first comes for ourselves. That compassion is birthed there in the level of pain, and then it's, expanded out into the duality and into the others that we have involved and, involved our lives in, like, all, it can be anybody, really. We
Mm.
can, we see how our actions uh, either created pain or were painful to ourselves or others. So
Mm.
that's when we get really into, forgiving ourselves. It's really, that level is about forgiving ourselves. We're not a
Mm.
victim any longer. We're
Yeah.
the we are the owner. We are the master of
Mm.
our circumstance. And
Mm.
that's when it gets really interesting.
So, so you've said before, going from unconsciousness, where you're effect, to cause enthusiasm. Uh, you're going from forgiving other people, where it's like they did it to me, I'm a victim, and all this, to forgiving yourself, where you sort of see your own role in it.
Well, that happens, like, anywhere from grief down.
Mm.
We're in victim mode, completely in victim mode.
Mm. Yeah,
So it doesn't
I
matter if
agree.
we're in the painful level of grief, we'll still be in victim mode there. So it's not
Mm.
until we get up into the heart that, into the what I like to call the crossroads. So it's not until we get up into there when we start to release the victim energy out of the emotional body. And from here, in the thyroid, in anger, um, the it's very, it really starts to turn, and it's not victimization at all. But we'll still get, as we're going through, even in the upper three, um, anger, pain, and enthusiasm, we will still have the remnants of victimization when we're dealing with
Mm.
unconsciousness, apathy, and grief. And so there'll still be, like, these, you'll see, like, these feelings as tiny little remnants, but they'll be very, in comparison to what's, um, from the solar plexus down, where that true, or emotional victimhood is, it'll be very little in comparison. Yeah.
Mm.
It's more about, this is where the perpetrator lives. The perpetrators up here and the victims down here, if we
Mm.
look at it in those terms.
No more excuses.
No more excuses. Well, and by perpetrator, I mean, if we are not controlling and containing and doing our work, our inner work for transmutation and realization, then we're perpetrating. We're putting it out into the outer world. So we're, attempts to manipulate or create or have power over others. These are the false
Mm.
powers that I'm speaking of. So if we're
Mm.
not containing it and working with it and transmuting it, the other thing is to be a perpetrator. And we see that a lot in our governments and our religious
Mm.
organizations, and in many types of organizations that have sort of like power and control hierarchy struggles within them.
Mm. Yeah. Well, when I was sort of getting ready to come on this chat with you, I was reminded of my medicine cards that I've got sitting over there somewhere, and I pulled out the deck, and I had three cards become sort of, I don't know, present themselves, or I noticed three of them in particular. One was the eagle, which was, I know, turned it the other way around when I put the cards away, and the other was the squirrel and the wild boar.
Oh,
Yeah, and I
so
could
what
remember
does
the
that bring up for you?
well. I couldn't remember what the squirrel and the boar were. I remembered the eagle was spirit as soon as I saw it, because I read that one a few times. The squirrel was about preparation for the future,
Mm.
and harvesting and storing, and maybe a bit of a hoarder vibe there. I don't know if you can go that way, but maybe that would be squirrel in reverse. And the wild boar is about confrontation,
Ah,
and I suppose that might have to do with anger issues and stuff like that. But the last sentence of the wild boar uh, paragraph, or the little page and a half written on it, is something like accepting what's real is half the battle. The wild boar thing is a story about someone who's told a lie and has to go and fight a wild boar, and the wild boar spirit comes to this person in the dream world or something like that, and sort of lectures them a bit and says, don't worry about the fear and this sort of thing. Yeah, so the last sentence is something like accepting what's real is half the battle, or perceiving what's true is
mm,
half the battle.
mm,
So I think, the battle here is maybe the transmutation, to sort of move upward through the crystal. Does that
mm.
sort of make sense to you as an
Yeah, what comes to
interpretation?
me when you say that is being willing to move upscale, because often we'll get really stuck and looping in a
Mm,
we'll be transmuting the same thing over and over and over and over again, simply because that becomes very easy and comfortable after a while. It's like anything. If we do it long enough, even if it's producing something that may be quite difficult, even though if it's something that we're accustomed to, it will seem easier and easier, and so we'll stay stuck in that for a little while.
mm,
So knowing when to move on, knowing when to move upscale in the emotional body and really keep moving upscale. That's kind of the beauty too of understanding and having um, an inner knowing of the emotional body and the levels of the emotional body, so that we know where we're going, and
mm.
and to really keep going, keep moving.
Yeah, because if you didn't have that, you'd get up to apathy and go, oh, I can't be bothered anymore, and then,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
get off the
Yeah.
table.
Yeah.
Or you'd get up to fear and say, I'm too scared to continue.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
So what happens in anger when you?
Or you want to just go out and get them.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
want to you want to find the external source of your pain. So and
Mm-hmm.
so did this to me.
Or an external receiver. It's often in anger. It's an external receiver of um, the uh, the perpetrator that is anger.
Mm.
So anger tends to want to be thrust out,
Mm.
and to be for a lot of these reasons, to have sort of, because it is uh, like a juicy, uh, very, like, I can feel it electrically
Mm.
if I'm near someone that has that's either working with anger, or is pushing it outwards, trying to have some kind of control in the outer realms with that energy, I feel it like an electrical uh, pulsation. And that's very intimidating for most people. And we feel that
Mm,
whether we're,
mm,
really aware of that electricity or not. We can walk through a crowd and we can feel that energy. And most people's reaction to that is to cower or succumb to that in some way. That's why it's so easy for people who are angry to take leadership roles and have power over the masses. It's
mm.
it's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
that energy. It's the energy of anger that people sort of succumb to. So
yeah.
when we can, if we can get into our own anger and really own it and feel it and love it and really become familiar with it and
Mm,
not projecting it out, then
mm,
that level of needing to sort of surrender to that in a way that um, we do. I see it a lot in an unconscious way. People succumb to it in a very unconscious way.
mm.
So when we become aware of it and really become become a master of part of it, at least part of our own rage, then we can start to be free sovereign beings,
Yeah, yeah,
especially when
absolutely.
we're controlling it and we're not perpetuating it onto anybody else.
Mm,
Mhm.
mm.
Yeah, yeah. I think this is, to me, this is the gateway to freedom. The throat is the gateway to freedom.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
To the higher levels of freedom. Yeah. Freedom is elusive beyond it, beneath it, I mean.
Mm,
Freedom is, it's very elusive. We can feel some freedom when we're working with fear. If we've really gotten to the place where we've released a lot of the fear out of our field, and that goes right down into the cellular, to all of the levels that we are as a human. And when that fear gets transmuted and released, we get fleeting levels of what we can feel is freedom. But when we start to really get uh, the level of anger mastered, that freedom
mm,
becomes a very tangible awareness.
mm,
It's not fleeting any longer, in other words. Yeah. I
mm.
mean, we have to maintain it. We have to, and continue to keep going, because after the pain, of course, then the pineal will open, and that's where the enthusiasm, or um, in body electronics, we called that, that was called enthusiasm, because John felt that, um, the word enthuse comes from the language of the Greek, and that word means, very roughly translated, source in you, or God in you, or whatever, whatever you want to term it, but the inner um, essence of what we are. We can, if we want to call that God, um, then that is where enthusiasm comes in. So the pineal represents the enthusiasm.
Mm.
So you see how not only represents, it resonates and is resonating from uh, uh, the connector, which we call the pineal.
Yeah.
So it's a connector between the earth and the sun, and it's the tiniest little gland that is connected to the rest of the endocrine system. But let me just remind here that, so it's not like we have to go all the way up the emotional body, because that takes some very intense efforts to get the pineal to open. Every single time we encounter enthusiasm on the scale of emotions, which is at every level, the top of every level is the level of enthusiasm. So every time we master a level and reach that level of enthusiasm, let's say the enthusiasm of unconsciousness is where we end up experiencing enthusiasm for the first time. So that level has the ability to transmute everything beneath it. So when we're at that level of enthusiasm, the pineal is starting to stir. The pineal is starting to open. If we have a calcium shield around that pineal, it starts to break down there. Then when we go to apathy, we get through the levels of apathy. At the top, we come to the apathetic level of enthusiasm that has the power to transmute everything beneath it. And the pineal opens a little further. So it's not like the pineal's getting this massive shock wave, for the first time, and it's just an absolute perfect system. It's perfect because let's look at it this way in terms of what's happening on the planet. You say you're having, a lot of political mumbo jumbo in New Zealand. So of course, the U.S. of A. is having something like that in November. There's other places in the world, that are doing the same things. So considering that those are at the level of anger, so when those constructs are those governmental constructs are being put out into the people, unless those people that are involved in it, which is anybody who wants to involve themselves in the political game, believing in the political game as a real and true thing, unless they get to the place where they can love it into non-existence, they won't go further into an evolutionary process. They'll stay there or beneath. So they won't come into true power. They won't come into true freedom. And they
sounds like some of these career politicians.
Pardon me?
It sounds like some of these career politicians, the same old circles.
It's all politics. It's all governmental. It's all of it. It's all religious authority that claims any kind of power over another. It takes anybody's sovereignty in any way, shape, or form. So, so it's, you've heard me say it before, it's the universal fail-safe. So they're never going to get to the place of true power. They're never going to find their Christed light because they haven't allowed that to be recycled back into the void. They've not let it go yet. So they can play the game, people can play the game, and for as long as they choose. That's the beauty of this growth process we call evolution. There's no time limit. There's no, we're each working on our own sovereignty at our own time, in our own choice, in our own, we can call it free will, but then free will actually has, a lot of limitations to it. It's not really free will when we're in the lower emotions. It's right? That's so right. I don't like to use the term free will, but we're making the choices to move forward and continue and keep going until we do find that sovereignty. That inner sovereignty, that true power, that true unmoving power. And you'll know that power by how much you can reach out and put your hands out to others to bring them up, and to anybody who will listen, anybody who wants to move on that evolutionary fast track. So it's really about service. It becomes really truly about service. If we know any beings that have come through and actually been individually in their own inner work, been through and brought into the true power, their main focus is on service for others. It's totally turned from here. It's wanting everything to come in, and manipulation and everything to be for them. And then by the time you get through personal pain and up into enthusiasm, it goes totally the opposite way. And then it's just about service. true service. And
Mm,
that can take many forms, of course, but the motivation changes drastically there.
mm, mm. Okay,
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. I think I agree with you there as far as mm,
Mhm.
yeah, makes me think of Dr. John, how he was, I don't know, uh, it just looked like that kind of person, I guess, giving this work to the world, or
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
people like yourself, all the other instructors.
Yeah.
We spent so many countless hours,
Right.
you
Right.
know,
I
even
remember
beyond
when
the
Doug,
preparations.
all those years that Doug taught, which was I think approximately 20 years as well. He
Mm,
had a time every day. I believe it was from 12 noon to 2 p.m. And he would take personal telephone calls for a question and answer every day, Monday through Friday. And he did that for years and years. And
wow.
I think I only called him over the years. I think I only called him 2 times. It was something, a question that I really felt I needed some guidance on. And often you would get a busy signal, and you'd have to, you know, be persevere in getting
Mm,
through. But he was very, Doug had, and probably still does, but in this telephone scenario, he was exactly 12 noon to exactly 2 o'clock, and then that was it. There was no more. You couldn't.
wow. So if
There was
someone's
no there
halfway
was no
through their next
201.
question, okay, wow,
Yeah, yeah. He was very exacting with that, and with many other
that's
things.
pretty brutal.
And with time, he was very. It was a very great teaching he gave around time. He said, people that were perpetually late. That's a classic control issue. And
Mm,
we would often play jokes on people because in large groups of people, like let's say there'd be 40 or 50 participants in a group, and he would start his lecture promptly at 9, and um, the same one or two or three people would come late every day. And I saw this intensive after intensive. It would be exactly the same. And so we would play a joke on that person. And when especially if it was for long periods of time, a week they'd come late, 15 minutes late, let's say every day. When that person would, and he would set it up with us as the group, that we would be really interested in and supportive in this. So Doug would say something like, the second they came into the room, he'd say, "And that's going to be the most important thing you hear at this intensive." And then we'd be like, "Wow, that was really amazing," And we would play the joke, and
yep,
I'll
wow.
never,
Open my third eye, man. Yeah, that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. You
Consciousness
know,
is quite a thing.
mm, yeah, I was a perpetually late child. I must have been really manipulative and controlling as a kid, but from a real apathetic point of view, because I was never really openly angry or anything. But then when I started doing karate, which is how I got into body electronics, because our karate teacher was into it, I was never late,
Mm.
maybe once or twice. But
Brought you into control, so that would have, the discipline of that would have brought it into your control.
yeah, well, I wanted to hear about this guy talking all this cosmic stuff. I was still always late for school, like school. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
But
So would you like to
hey,
say any more words before we wrap it up for this evening?
yes, I wanted to ask you what you think of cheese.
Cheese?
Yeah, as a food on the program, I'm talking like good quality cheese,
Yeah.
not.
It
not
depends
the
on the person.
processed
It
stuff.
really depends on the person. I used to have a little bit of like really good organic cheese from England on occasion. Um,
Mm.
and I had to let that go as well. So it really depends on the individual. Any
Okay.
like cheese with casein in it, don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Most cheeses that you buy are complete garbage. So just find something, you know, that's if you really want some cheese, use it very sparingly, more like a
Mm.
treat food.
Okay.
That's what I
Like
did
you
for a
would.
period of time. Because
Yeah.
I want, it was so delicious. I think it was more like a pleasure thing for me. It wasn't something that I was using for any kind of nutrition. I wouldn't say it's nutritionally rewarding at all, but it
Oh,
was
really?
more just, just for my own treat food. Treat, don't cheat, right?
Mm.
Is the motto. So I would have a little bit now and again of this really absolutely gorgeous cheese. And this spring, I had to let go of a lot of things. It was made very clear to me that I had to let go of a lot of things that just weren't serving me anymore at all. And I had to let completely go of them. It wasn't like I could have a little treat now and again. They had to go. So I worked through it was a very sort of intense time of working through letting go of a glass of wine, a cup of coffee, wheat, cheese, things that had kind of wheat had kind of snuck in
Mm.
back in earlier in the year. I had been years off of wheat, and then it just like a little devil does, sneaks its way back in until you become aware of it, and then you have to
Okay.
remove it.
So you're avoiding wheat because of the gluten?
No, not necessarily. There's again, it depends on the person. Some people are
Okay.
extremely gluten sensitive, but there's
I'm
all kinds
assuming.
of other aspects to wheat that
Mm.
is really. I feel there's um, a lot of people, like the majority of people, can't tolerate wheat, even organic wheat
Interesting.
or even sprouted wheat, and even all the different. I've tried everything,
Wow.
for long periods of time, and wheat just doesn't serve any longer. I don't know if it's the farming practices. I can't. There's probably a myriad of reasons, but wheat really doesn't serve people. It's very inflammatory. The bowel doesn't accept it, as in a nutritious way. Um, so again, it depends on the person. Some people can
Okay.
tolerate it, but here's another thing. That just because you don't maybe blow up and your belly doesn't blow up like a wheat belly doesn't mean that it's not creating some inflammation.
Mm.
People can be extremely inflamed and not even show signs of it and symptoms. It can be,
Yep.
they can cause inflammation for years and not have those symptoms present.
Yep.
So,
Interesting.
bottom line for me is no wheat.
Cool. I've just been reading this. Bernard Jensen,
Oh
tissue
yeah,
cleansing through
that's a
bowel
great one.
management.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
he
and
was
I
a
just read the bit on. Yeah,
wasn't Bernard Jensen just a wonderful pioneer?
yeah. I mean, I just read the chapter or the bit where he's talking about the structure of the intestines, and he's
Uh-huh.
saying, the nerve supply around the large intestine is very poor, or there's very little there.
Mm.
It's just part of evolutionary design or whatever, and so you'll often have problems without even being able to feel it, just like you're saying. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
Until
getting
it
getting
really
back to.
comes out, it can come out in the skin, or it will start coming out eventually. But by that
Mm.
time, you'll have to unravel it. It'll take a lot of time to unravel. Yeah.
Mm. Okay.
What were you going
So
to say?
getting back to cheese, casein is a kind of protein, isn't it?
It's an additive that they put in,
Oh,
and
okay.
again, it's a part of. Uh, I really, you'll have to research that guy, because it's something that those nutritional details, um, you'll have to look at it, but it's also a cause of inflammation, and it's just every time that I've eaten cheese with casein, it has had a effect on my body that wasn't taking me in the right direction.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
I think now we're at a time where we
Okay.
really have to look carefully about what is um, taking us in the right direction, and by that
Hmm.
I mean up. So the direction of evolution, the direction of increased vitality. So what we used to be able to get away with 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, we really can't any longer. So it's really cleaning up our diet and making a conscious effort, whether it's daily or moment to moment, to really to make that effort to clean up the diet. When I let go of coffee, which
Hmm.
was quite a I had spent lots of time in my life not having coffee, but I had become addicted to it again. It had become very habitual. So I turned that, I let it go. I drank only lemon water for a period of time, like weeks. And then I introduced turmeric drink with shatavari and ashwagandha and ginger, all organic, and a tiny bit of cardamom put on top at the very end to stimulate the turmeric, and then blended it with coconut milk. That's what I do every morning now.
Wow.
Yeah.
How does that? How do you go as far as your energy levels?
In terms of letting go of the coffee
Yeah.
or the caffeine, and
Or
not only letting go of the coffee, but I also let go of anything with caffeine. So there's no chocolate, black tea, or anything like that. I'm not replacing the caffeine with
okay.
the caffeine in coffee with another form of caffeine. So I've
Hmm.
removed caffeine completely. And there was a period of time, I think it was like a feel sorry for myself time when I was really, I was just really processing the letting go, the grief involved in the habitual um, intake of certain substance, certain foods that had become
Hmm.
habitual, that
Yeah.
created this feeling of loss thereafter. So when I got on the other side of that, which I think was about 2 weeks, um, I didn't feel any form of lack of energy at all. In fact, quite the opposite. So I absolutely don't miss it at all. In fact,
Wow.
I
Awesome.
know that my adrenal glands are saying, all the time, thank you. Thank you for relieving us of that stress that I was putting my adrenals under every day when I was consuming anything that was triggering any kind of an adrenal response, like coffee.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's like the
Awesome.
vitality came back. I feel yesterday was my birthday. I turned 61, and I feel vitality. Thank you. I
Happy
feel
birthday.
this vitality from letting those things go. Um, cheese and soy was never a part of my life, but if it was, that would have been gone too. Corn had not been a part of my life for years, but if it was,
Hmm.
I would have let go of that too.
Hmm.
There's all of these things that are no longer um, conducive to our vitality.
Hmm.
And the sooner we let go of those things, the better our body can regenerate and start our electrical activity that is in direct connection to the earth.
Hmm. Okay. So I'm just making a note. Something I want to share on the Gnostic Way page, or run it by you, I suppose. Uh, Documentary called Seed, which is
Oh yeah.
about,
Uh-huh.
you've seen it.
I think I did see it. Yeah.
I think it came out maybe 4 or 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just about, it goes through sort of about different things. Like starts off with these hippie guys, sort of harvesting, or not harvesting, going out into the forests of the Amazon and all these obscure deserts and stuff, and trying to find very rare seeds and this sort of thing, and sort of talks a lot about the uniformity of the food supply nowadays. So you
Right.
talked about wheat before, and it just got me thinking. Maybe part of the problem is, 200 or 300 years ago, we didn't have only wheat. We had, heaps and heaps of different varieties of wheat and all these other different kinds of plants that
Exactly.
we probably don't have anymore.
Yes.
That would have done a similar thing. So if we had wheat, it may have just been a tiny percentage, and it wouldn't have, it would have been insignificant. But of course, agriculture takes one thing and just grows it endlessly,
Right.
and then
The
you end up with
overconsumption of that one thing too.
Yeah.
Because for most people still, wheat is a daily part of their diet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that overconsumption of that, that monoculture, or that mono agriculture, is part of it. Yes, definitely.
Okay. I wanted to ask you something else. Symptoms of protein deficiency. And I've looked into this a little bit. I've got the striations on my fingernails.
Okay.
And I've been really conscious about my protein lately. Maybe the problem is digestive.
Okay.
I haven't had any enzymes for a long time because the supplier ran out, and I emailed him and he said he'd send me some, and then I think he forgot, something like that, and then I forgot.
The fingernails are usually more indicative of mineral intake.
Okay.
So, and trace minerals. So,
Okay.
but let's go back to the protein. Protein has never been a problem for people. It's what people are actually lacking is the form of raw protein. So we have to make that distinction. So, we get protein from everything basically that we eat has some level of protein in it. But the raw protein is really what we need for the amino acids to be present in our system. So if we're lacking in raw protein, which most people are, then that's when the sort of the downward cycle of our everything in our body, every single thing needs raw protein, particularly our hormone production. So when that starts to decrease and our hormones aren't being produced properly, then we'll see because the endocrine system is completely connected. If one goes, if one part of our endocrine system isn't producing the correct amount of hormones, it affects the entire system. So I would say go back to remembering the raw protein every day. If there's no allergic responses, like bee pollen is an excellent source of vegetarian raw protein. So of course vegans don't like anything made by a bee, so that's going to be an issue. But raw protein is extremely important, and in the bee pollen there's the entire spectrum of the amino acids. As long as it hasn't been heated or damaged, and hence it's raw. So the other thing we need to know about the bee pollen is it needs to be crushed before we consume it. And we find that if we add just a tiny little bit of honey, it's assimilated better. And I suggest that people take it on a empty stomach. So it's often it's a great thing to do first thing in the morning. You take your bee pollen right away. You know that you have your raw protein intake for the day, and and then everything else kind of falls into place. So that's really important.
Okay. Yeah.
If we're eating raw vegetables, pardon?
Sorry.
If we're eating something, if we're eating raw vegetables or fruit or any other form of raw food, then the the enzymes that are in that food is only enough to digest that food.
Mm.
So we're not providing like this extra that we need, and that can be done by just taking that bit of bee pollen, so that we know that we have all those amino acids, and it'll actually be, if we take it every day, we'll also be working off some of our long-standing deficiencies, amino acid and enzyme deficiencies. So it's really, I recommend that as the sort of the best vegetarian form of raw protein.
Mm. Yeah.
What do you
Yeah.
like as a source of raw protein? Do you have something in particular that?
These sold by my local supermarket.
What are they?
Little sprouts.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've got some mung beans in the fridge.
Excellent.
Little chickpeas.
Great. Sprouted beans. Awesome.
Yeah.
Sprouted chickpeas. Yeah.
And
Excellent.
my mum sent me a whole bag of walnuts. So I'm a big fan of, salads with, sun-dried tomatoes and feta cheese. I love that whole Mediterranean diet or something. I must have been a Spaniard in my previous life or something. I don't know. But yeah, I love the, leafy greens and, maybe a bit of fish here and there or whatever you got.
Great. Great.
No,
Yeah,
oily.
the sprouts are awesome. Yeah, thanks for showing us that. Also, you mentioned the nuts, so it's important for people who are watching this to realize that nuts, all nuts and seeds, require a soak. So soaking overnight and then giving them a good rinse the next day. That takes out all of the the phytonutrients. Is that the right term? The phytonutrients.
I thought the term phytic acid came.
Phytic acid. That's it.
I think that's for spinach. Is that for nuts as well?
Right, the nuts and the seeds.
The enzyme inhibitor?
The phytic acid has to be released, which it can be done in just a few hours of soaking.
Yeah. Oh, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's also nice. The enzyme, it's the enzyme inhibitor is what you want to get rid of. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's also, like you say, that's also why we steam all of the, the spinach and anything from the cabbage family needs to have that phytic acid is released in the steaming process, in the cooking process. Also in the nuts and the seeds in a roasting process. But if you roast it, then it loses some of its, it's no longer raw. So so you take it sort of out of its raw state when you roast it.
Yeah, yeah. I think I remember reading that soaking it was the best and cooking it was a little bit worse than that, and eating it sort of unsoaked or uncooked was even worse as far as the enzyme inhibitors.
Exactly.
Does that sound right to you?
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I remember when I first got started in BE, we'd make these nut shakes, and that would be the breakfast. You soak Brazil nuts, soak linseed for the EFAs. They had a really good ratio of the omega-3, 6, and 9.
So linseed, flaxseed, is it the same?
Yeah, flaxseed. Yeah. Right. Apparently, hemp seed oil is better for that.
I really have been appreciating the hemp oils and the hemp hearts. So it's a volatile oil, just like flax oil, so it needs to be refrigerated, and the hemp hearts also. And they used to be, they need to be used. So you have to, when you get them, use them up. But I have a bag of hemp hearts in my fridge, and that's also a very excellent form of raw protein, by the way, the hemp hearts. So I sprinkle a good amount on my salads or soups or whatever I'm preparing. It's nice on a lot of things. Give that a little bit of a crunch.
Can I ask you, what do you think of? It might be a really obvious question, but I know. What do you think of the work of Weston A. Price, the that dentist that went around and looked at all the
Yeah,
indigenous people?
it's an excellent his book, Nutrition and Physical
Mm,
Degeneration, an
mm,
excellent look at how the whole white flour, white sugar, um, leached into even tribal communities. And
mm,
so he went back. That book, has all the photographs, as you know, and it
mm,
showed he went back to tribal communities and did a lot of measuring and found like just in one or two generations, um, the jaws were deformed, the sinuses became pinched, and
mm,
the teeth, what once was a beautiful jaw full of beautiful teeth and wide, nice wide jaws, became crowded and pinched, and the teeth just really um, suffered as a result. And then
mm,
he took that hypothesis. It's actually because he was a dentist, he used that, but it's actually the entire body became
mm,
malformed as a result of the white
mm.
sugar, white flour
Yeah,
onset. So
like
his work, I
he
think, is
mm,
is was a very important work, and
mm,
very a very great study. I mean, that was on one of that book was on the list of books to read when
yeah,
I entered body electronics.
yeah. So much information in that book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And his wife accompanied him, by the way, on all those
Mm,
trips around the world, which was probably a lot more difficult back then.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like,
Yeah.
the Weston Price Foundation is still alive and well.
Mm,
Sally Fallon um,
mm,
is a great person in this day and age that has kept that work alive.
yeah.
And I appreciate the work of Sally Fallon and um, Nourishing Traditions. I always have on the shelf a great
Mm.
book, and she's written other books as well. But yeah, beautiful, beautiful work.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything? Oh, uh, I've asked you about that before. I was going to ask about eating, those bone broths and stuff like that. So
Mm,
obviously you're still all
mm-hmm.
good with eating
Right,
a bit
right.
of meat, a bit of bone broth around.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up that way.
Mm,
I didn't, when that came out, I didn't see that as anything new.
that
That sort
was
of, it
normal.
hit sort of the urban market, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that seemed to be something new. But I was born and raised on a dairy farm.
Mm,
So my mother would often have a big pot of bones,
mm,
going for 8 hours on the stove, simmering away, and
mm,
and then strain it out and make soups. We grew up with that. Our entire, my entire childhood was, um,
mm,
we used everything. So yeah, yeah,
mm,
I think it's an extremely, of course we have to, the bottom line with that is we have to know where the animals are coming from. They have to be,
mm,
they have to be healthy, and a healthy animal is a holistically healthy animal. So if we can find here in Nelson, there's people who are raising beautiful, pastured um, animals that I'm sure are well loved and well cared for. This is what I would say that's the most important thing. It's not about going to a butcher and just finding some bones, but to really find the people who are in touch with these animals, who are lovingly raising these animals. I think that's really important if we're going to choose animals in our diet.
mm, mm. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I come from a sort of farming culture on my mother's side. So yeah, go and visit the relatives when I was a kid, and hang out on the farm and chase sheep around the field and stuff like that. Play sheep rugby. Mm. So how is Canada's COVID sort of quarantine restrictions at the moment?
It changes all the time. You just
Oh,
have,
really?
and every province is different. So here in
Mm,
British Columbia, here in this city of Nelson, we're enjoying a lot of freedom.
mm,
So,
cool.
I was downtown today and it's booming. It's just everybody is
Cool.
booming.
Yeah, you
Um,
got some good markets and stuff like that nearby.
Beautiful, just beautiful. And there's all the restaurants are up and running and they have all
Oh, nice.
patios and everything's doing really, really, really well. We want to continue going in that direction. Um, Today I read something about Ontario where they're putting in more restrictions. They added more restrictions today. So I can't really answer that with any form of certainty of any
Wow.
direction, and it can go one direction one day and one direction the other direction the next. It's
Mm,
it's a political game that
yeah.
is really beyond my comprehension of how they're making the decisions.
Mm.
I
Maybe.
started today off 4:30 this morning a.m. I got up to um, be present for the Sasha Stone. It was going to be 4 hours, but it ended up being almost 5 hours. It was a very beautiful trip around the world of speakers, starting in Australia this morning at 5 a.m. Uh, my time here in Pacific Northwest of Canada, and it went like I said, for about 4 hours and 45 minutes was the
Wow.
completion of it. And you can see that full um, online at reclaimyourlives.com.
Okay.
And it was an extraordinary um, uh, group of people that that I've become familiar with in the last few months
Okay.
through Sasha Stone's tireless work that he's been giving, and many others, of course. So he really brought to this fantastic group of people. It ended with uh, it just ended beautifully. I won't give you too much detail, but Robert Kennedy Jr. was the last person to speak, and he really brought it all together. There was another man
Wow.
too that was at the end, beautiful speaker, but the speakers were absolutely beautiful, and was called "Drawing the Line in the Sand." We are now drawing our line in the sand. So
Mm,
basically claiming our sovereignty. So I think enough people have passed through the gate of the higher emotions, so that we can really truly claim our true sovereignty and our true
mm,
power, which is the oneness of uh, what we have here on this earth in consciousness, and um, in that true sense of love and that true sense of um, being, from the inside out.
mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So reclaimyourlives.com and the work of Sasha Stone. I highly
Mm.
recommend everybody to find that.
Okay.
Yeah. If
Mm.
sovereignty and freedom is what you're seeking, then it's just great to hear that there are just so many people working on that and working in that uh, right now. It's not a myth any longer. It's not a dream. It's a reality.
Mm.
Mhm.
That's great. Great to hear.
Yes.
Mm. Mm.
So
So
shall we
you've shared. Sorry.
go ahead?
Oh, you've shared a few of his videos up on there. He
Yes.
looks. I mean, it sort of reminds me of Russell Brand, just in how it looks. I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah. No, it's very different actually. I wouldn't compare those two people. They're
Oh,
probably
okay.
they're two very different individuals.
Mm.
Um, but Sasha, to me, I've had a vision that was given to me as a small child. And when I started to listen to Sasha, I felt very clearly that he is the spokesperson for and his work is also called the New Earth Project, not the just New Earth Project. So he is the spokesperson. He has this command of language due to his amazing experience on this planet. He has beautiful intelligence and a beautiful experience both inside and out. The amount of learning that he has participated in. So he comes from this place of truth. That's the best way I can put it. When you hear truth, you know it. You know it in your soul, and he speaks truth. And as we all do, there's opinions, and he, even within myself, has brought up some cognitive dissonance. And I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater when that happens. I recognize it and allow it and let it be. So but the beauty is there, the truth is there. So I highly recommend his work. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote him a note and asked him if I could have permission to put some of his videos on my website, and he wrote back and said, please use freely, because what he is and what he does is given freely. And I really appreciate that. He's of the highest integrity.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. That's good to know.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll watch some of the ones that you put on the Gnostic Way page.
Yes, it's very inspiring. And on his website, sashastone.com, and Sasha is spelled Sacha. So sashastone.com. He has all kinds of videos on there that he has created and films that he has done. He's a filmmaker, is one of the things that he does. So, but the last few months he's been tireless in giving interviews, many per day. So, so his website's a great, if you want to have lots of, beautiful information, it's there. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Alrighty.
So shall we complete for now? And
okay.
if you're willing to do this again, we can do round 2 in the near future.
Yeah, sounds good. Good.
Great.
All right. Happy birthday again.
Great questions for me. I really appreciate that, Guy.
No, that's cool.
So you're coming from Wellington, New Zealand?
Yeah, that's right.
From so you're going into spring.
Yes. We're sort of, I don't know, halfway through it. We've just had our, what do you call it, daylight savings.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So or maybe that's not halfway. Maybe it's
We're going the other direction.
Yeah. Okay.
It's beautiful here though. It's gorgeous. Really gorgeous.
Okay.
The leaves are starting to turn, and the sun was very beautiful. I watched the sunset. As you know, I'm very I love the sunrise and sunset. It's very important. So it's still, we're still able to enjoy that outdoors.
That's cool. And you've got a beautiful stone house there.
It's a stone foundation. It's a beautiful stone foundation that was built in 1901.
Wow.
So it's quite gorgeous, and
cool.
We're really happy. Yeah.
Cool. That's like some of the houses around here. They're really, really old. Very old British Victorian townhouses. They're all a bit sort of wonky in the foundation now, because Wellington.
This one's as solid as can be. They're
awesome.
Absolutely solid. Yeah.
I'm jealous. Cool.
Yeah.
That's great. Hey, nice painting behind you there.
Do you know who did these paintings?
I'm going to guess Rose.
Yeah. This is her apple. Wow. Series of 3, and I've brought them with me through many across the country and to many places that I've lived. So
Wow.
yeah, I
Beautiful gold.
really enjoy them. Yeah, I've had them for many years. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah. Rose Canino, rosecanino.com.
mm. Very talented lady.
That's for sure. Yeah.
You made my friend a very colorful shirt, you know, a
Oh,
sort of
yes, she was doing
jersey.
those sweaters.
Mm,
Right,
mm. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Oh,
Haven't those paintings got the most beautiful gold on them? Goes really well with your the top.
yes, yes, very coordinated.
Yeah, they have the color coordination.
Well, thank you so much, Guy. I really
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great to have the connection. Thank you.
yeah.
Okay,
Hopefully,
all
I'll
the
see you in
best.
the next year or two.
That would be great. Yeah, come on
Yeah,
up. Yeah, come
yeah.
on up.
Awesome.
Okay,
Alrighty, my dear.
yeah, see you soon
All right.
on video.
All right.
Okay.
See ya.
So long.
Bye.
Bye.